All right, Friday morning, Chase Sr. in the house. It's the Krug Show brought to you by Pig and a Pickle. We got a lot to get to, a lot of interesting stuff in Ninerland. Let's go right here. All right, Friday. Welcome to the Krug Show. Hope everybody's having a great day. We're brought to you by Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue in all of Northern California. We're also brought to you by Sharp Corner Sports Cards and Collectibles. They're at Anthony Catania's at 831-521-5264. And as you can see over Chase's head, we're brought to you by Mancini's Sleep World. Mancini's offers a 120-night guarantee with a range of brands and price points. Click the link below or go to sleepworld.com and find a bed that works for you, whether you shop online or visit in store. Use the code KRUG10 and you'll get 10% off. Once again, KRUEG10, and you'll get 10% off in store or online at sleepworld.com. And once again, the link is in the description for our sponsors. Chase, good to see you, man. How are you?
Doing great, Krug. I was talking to you prior to us going live. You're back from spring training, baseball around the corner. You know what the crazy thing is about the NFL, and it's obviously changed throughout my lifetime, but especially for you, that's not an age slight. It's just the truth. Is that the NFL has become a 12-month sport at this point. There really are no breaks. The season starts August pretty much with preseason. Regular season goes until June. It goes until February, and then right after that is the NFL Combine, then NFL free agency, then the NFL Draft, and then you get rookie minicamps, OTAs, mandatory minicamp, and then training camp after a slight delay at the end of June into July. But it's good for us because we like to create content. So,
yeah, it's funny. When do you take your vacations? Because it's like, you're right. It's like if you're a Niner content creator, you're not taking a vacation in July. That's camp. I mean, let's say second half of July.
Yeah.
You're not taking August, no, preseason. September, October, November, December is the season.
Yep.
January is the playoffs. February is the Super Bowl. The Combine, you go to Mobile. You go to the Combine. Literally, are you like on the Shanahan plan where you're like May 15th to July 15th? In that window, is that where you vacation?
Here's the thing, too. I mean, a lot of people don't realize this. I talk about the NBA and cover the NBA here at Chat Sports as well. And so in the summer, when it's the downtime for football, that's when the NBA finals are taking place, NBA free agency, NBA draft. That started to take a little bit of a backseat because my NFL channels have become so large. So this summer, it's probably going to be a little bit different. But yeah, I mean, June, July, that's the time to really get away, reset a little bit. But this has been, in particular, a crazy year for me with Niners, Eagles. I went to New Orleans for the Super Bowl, went to the NFL Combine, and I'm like, when am I going to be able to catch a breath? And then I'm starting to feel rejuvenated a little bit again because I'm really excited for free agency. But look, I can't complain. This is a dream job. I've wanted to be in sports broadcasting since I was 5 years old. And so I'm definitely enjoying all of this and having the big platform that I have.
It is kind of a dream job. People will say to me, man, you've got the dream job. Well, it's I'll tell you what's really great is like doing what we did this week where we went to Scottsdale. We went to spring training games. We went and had a great old time, but we still did our videos. We still did our streams, and the streams blew up this week. I mean, Kevin and I popped on a couple days and got big numbers. And the reason for it is that the news was there. Debo gets traded. Aiyuk rumors really. And I've been throwing out your quote. Why don't we start there? I know Kev titled this, The Insider Expects New Negotiation Strategy for the 49ers Moving Forward. But your question to John Lynch at the Combine really, to me, was like the most significant moment thus far of the offseason. And people would say, Krug, you're overblowing it. No, I'm not. I really don't think I am. You said, John, there's been some talk about Brandon Aiyuk. It was a two-part question, but part of it was like, hey, there's been some trade talk about Brandon Aiyuk. What do you think? And instead of saying what we all thought he would say, which is, we just signed him last year, as you know, to a big money long-term deal. He's going nowhere. He's our guy. We love him, and that's it. Instead, he didn't say any of that.
No.
And then he started talking about how much, where they rank. They're number 2 in cash spending, which is an area only the owner would care about. And that there needs to be a reset. And he basically said, and there's some good that can come of it, never really referencing what it was. And then saying, because we need to get younger. And it almost, my take away from it, Chase, was you asked the question, and my take was he basically told us he's going to trade Brandon Aiyuk at a loss, which we kind of knew, right? Because he's hurt and he's got a big contract, for probably draft pick compensation that of some kind, and that the fans are not going to love it, but overall it's going to be good because they need to get younger and cheaper and healthier. That was my takeaway. Was that your takeaway from what he told you?
Yeah, for sure. And it was funny because after he left the podium at the combine, I turned to Grant Cohn to my right and I'm like, look, I haven't slept the last couple of days because night 1 at my Airbnb, somebody got killed in front of it. Night 2, we got burglarized and had thousands of dollars of equipment stolen. And then I went into the John Lynch press conference having not slept for a couple of days after driving 13 hours from Dallas to Indianapolis. And I was like to Grant, am I tripping? Or did he not shoot down the Brandon Aiyuk trade at all? And he didn't. And it was a 2-part question because I asked John, there's a report here from Indianapolis that teams are interested in trading for Brandon Aiyuk. What's the latest on that? And do you have an injury update on him? Because obviously he's coming off that really bad injury. And oftentimes general managers will just focus on one part of the question because they forget about the other part. But then we learned later that coming up, there's going to be a pretty big indicator of where he is in that injury recovery. But obviously the big answer was pretty much, yeah, we've been one of the highest cash spending teams in the NFL. We want to get younger this offseason. And at some point, you need to reset the salary cap a little bit. And trading away Brandon Aiyuk could be a part of that, is pretty much what he talked about. And you make a good point in him saying there could be some good that comes out of it. And some of that good, Larry, is what we talked about Friday before the Deebo Samuel trade, that they might eat some of this money right now, trading away Deebo. And while they're saving $17.5 million, they are eating a lot of that money. And if they trade Aiyuk away, they might eat some of that money, but they could do that now to save money for the future. And I think John Lynch talked openly about that team building strategy being something that they want to accomplish. And then you have this Mike Silver story come out today on this Friday, March 7th, that there's a little bit of a philosophical change between Jed York, Krug, Kyle Shanahan, and John Lynch for how they're going to handle these contract negotiations, how bullish they plan on being, how aggressive they want to be with cutting costs in certain areas. And then, of course, the inside the building change of Jed York wants Kyle Shanahan to focus more on X's and O's on the offense and coaching and less on these contract negotiations. And so you're seeing a pretty big shift here with the Niners team building strategy and how they plan to handle some of these things. And I do think there can be a lot of good that comes from it. And I don't think that this reset is going to lead to a rebuild. And I don't think that the Niners are in a bad spot going into 2025. I do think that they can win at some point, but they probably, in hindsight, and you and I actually talked about this last offseason, probably should have done this last offseason, where they made some of these changes instead of trying to go all in and run it back. And obviously that didn't work out at all.
So Mike Silver, you mentioned Mike Silver. And so Mike Silver, this is at the SF Niners. And I'm trying to look it up on my computer here. Where I could call it up on the screen. Let me see if I can do that real quick here. There we go. We'll take a look and we'll pull this up on the screen. But, it is really interesting. Okay, so Mike Silver, and here we go. Let's see. I'll share the screen and you guys can see this as well. So we're just talking about something that's on Twitter right now, and I'll read it. But basically, Mike Silver alludes to an organizational shift within the 49ers while mentioning Kyle Shanahan is not in danger of losing his job. It says, quote, and while Shanahan may not have done his best coaching job in 2024, his seat is not even lukewarm, and he likely regrets his mad sprint up the stairs as much as anybody. That said, it makes sense that York would prefer Shanahan focus on doing what he does best, scheming it up and coaching the players on the roster, than worrying about making sure so many of his high-profile players make bank. I mean, it sounds to me, I mean, I've been arguing this for a while, that just because you're a great head coach and you're of an offense that works and you're a great play caller doesn't mean that you should necessarily are a great personnel guy.
Right.
I mean, you know, in Philly, they're on top of the football world. Sirianni's the coach. Roseman's the GM. Sirianni's not the GM.
Right.
Roseman's the GM. Sirianni doesn't put together the roster. He's in the room when they're discussing it. It's not like he's locked out, but he's not the guy. It's Roseman. It's a different skill set. And I get the sense that Jed is looking at this and he doesn't want to fire anybody, but he wants to hit a reset. And I think he basically said, hey, Kyle, you just coach. Hey, John, you just draft. And we'll have Parag do the negotiations because he's less involved, less connected, and maybe in the eyes or mind of Jed York, Jed and the Niners will get a better financial deal on some of these deals if Parag is negotiating. You think I'm reading that correctly? Or, I mean, we have no official anything from the Niners, but it sure looks like that.
No, for sure. And I think that there can be a lot of good and there are positives when people have defined roles. And that's for corporate life, for all types of different businesses and different industries, especially in sports, right? If an athlete doesn't know what their defined role is, sometimes they get lost and they're looking for their identity. They don't feel comfortable. Sometimes with coaches, they win a lot, they get a lot of power, and their strength is coaching, yet they're taken away from that because they have to focus on other things. And I'm just thinking, racking my brain right now of some recent examples of this, right? Andy Reid, when he first started in Philadelphia, solely focused on the offense and the development of Donovan McNabb. What did they do? They made it to 4 straight NFC championship games and a Super Bowl. Then he won a lot. They had so much success. He got a lot of say in personnel. That's when his coaching went downhill and slid a little bit. And that's when the Eagles had a gap of not having high-level success. They didn't make it to another NFC championship game until 2008, 2009, and he had some of that player personnel power taken away from him, and the Eagles were able to find success again. With Bill Belichick, you know, early on he had say with defensive personnel. Then he started to be the general manager for the New England Patriots. They had a decade-long run where they didn't make it to a Super Bowl, and they could not hit on offensive players at all. Then toward the end of his tenure, he started to get a lot of that power back, and the Patriots weren't good after they lost Tom Brady. And so for Kyle Shanahan, I think that his focus has been directed not just on getting the offense right, on play calls, play designs, game management. He's had to manage other things, contract negotiations, roster personnel. Then the special teams became so bad. He had to devote time to that. He had to devote time to the defense, and that took him away from what he does at an elite level, which is calling the offense. And so now, after a 6-11 season where the Niners were bad, they were awful at the end of the year, and they started to slip in all of these areas, I actually give credit to the Niners for looking themselves in the mirror and making some difficult changes that I think were needed. Kyle Shanahan with the coaching staff needed to fire his boy Nick Sorensen. He did that. He was loyal to Brian Schneider, not anymore. Brought in Brant Boyer. And the Niners now, I think that they're tired of getting bullied in some of these contract negotiations because it hasn't really worked out all that well with the likes of Deebo Samuel and Nick Bosa and Brandon Aiyuk and Trent Williams and Christian McCaffrey. So now they're saying we can't allow this to happen again because if we continue to operate this way, we'll get to a point where we're not going to be able to regroup and rebound. Now, with the slight little reset and some slight changes, they can get ahead of it, and hopefully that will lead to a quick bounce back instead of a full tear it down and rebuild, which can take a long while.
You know, one of the things, if you type in Twitter right now, Brandon Aiyuk. It comes up Brandon Aiyuk, Patriots, Brandon Aiyuk to the Patriots.
Yeah.
There's an awful lot of smoke about this. And it's not just uncredible, people, fans, and that kind of thing. Todd McShay was talking about it on his podcast yesterday that he's hearing the Aiyuk to the Patriots rumblings. And one of the guys had a specific thing that it might be, Aiyuk to the Patriots in a deal that would result in a flip-flopping or an exchange of draft choices, which immediately makes me wonder, man, with the Pats who just found out that a lot of talk that they want Will Campbell or Armand Membu at 4. Right. But then the talk was that Will Campbell has short arms and that, maybe he'll fall down between 10 and 15. Would they move back with the Niners to 11, let the Niners move up for an Abdul Carter or a Mason Graham, with using Aiyuk as the bait? One, how likely do you think it is that the Niners move Aiyuk? And how likely is it? I had Tom Kern on from NBC Boston last night. And he said that he's hearing it on his end as well, that the Pats who badly wanted Aiyuk last year, Aiyuk told them no. Now he's under contract. He doesn't have the ability to tell them no. But it sounds like, they like Drake May and they're trying to build up around Drake May and they feel like maybe they can get the tackle and the receiver all in one swoop. If you look at over the cap numbers, it kind of shows that the Patriots have the most cap room of anybody. They have $125.1 million in cap space. Number 2 is the Chargers with 90. The Niners, by the way, are way down the list at 34.3 million. What do you make of Aiyuk to the Pats? Do you think it's viable?
I think it is viable just because of where the Patriots are, right? Drake May had a really good season last year, and he did it with pretty suspect offensive line play and no skill position player on the offensive side of the football. And you look at what the Commanders are doing right now with Jaden Daniels. They make the trade for Debo. They have so much cap space, so due to the Patriots. And they're doing that because they're trying to take advantage of Jaden Daniels being on his rookie contract. Because as compared to other upper echelon quarterbacks in the NFL, if you hit on that rookie quarterback and you have them under team control for the next 4 or 5 years, they come at a fraction of the price of the top 10 highest paid quarterbacks who are all making 50, 60 plus $million per year, right? And so the Patriots are in the same situation as the Commanders. Not as good of a roster, not as good of a team, but Drake May was a first-round pick. He now has 4 more years if they exercise his 5th-year option on that rookie deal. And so now is the time to pounce and be aggressive in trying to bring in playmakers, spend money to try to go all in to take advantage of this minute time period here where you have that cheap quarterback to try to bulk up your roster with marquee players. The Houston Texans had this same strategy last offseason when they signed Azeez Al-Shire and they signed Danielle Hunter. They traded for Stephon Diggs. And that really is the team building strategy that a lot of teams have gone about business in that manner over the last few years. And so I think the Patriots are going to call the Seahawks about DK Metcalf. I think they're going to call the 49ers about Brandon Aiyuk. We know the risk with Aiyuk, right? The risk is that the Niners just signed him to a $120 million contract. He's coming off a really severe knee injury where he tore multiple ligaments, ACL, MCL, and other structural damage. There's also questions, when is he going to be able to come back in 2025? We're not sure. But if you're the Niners, are you willing to eat some of that dead money, trade him away, get out of the contract for the long haul if the offer is pretty good, to just rid yourself of that deal? And if the offer is too sweet, yeah, Larry, I think the Niners could trade Aiyuk away as part of this organizational reset. And then they sign Juwan Jennings to a contract extension. Maybe they sign a Devontae Adams, who you could get at $20 million per year instead of Aiyuk at $30 million per year. And then you have Ricky Pearsall, Juwan Jennings, Devontae Adams, Jacob Cowing. Maybe you sign another veteran. Maybe you draft a wide receiver, albeit in a pretty thin wide receiver draft class. And so when John Lynch doesn't shoot that down, when I asked him about trading Aiyuk, I think there's substance and weight there. And when some of the top NFL insiders are talking about teams calling about Aiyuk, I do think that is for real. And that was a lot of the chatter while at the NFL Combine last week.
Wow. That is just amazing. I mean, it's incredibly amazing considering they just signed this guy to a big money deal. He was their guy, but there was a weird vibe. I mean, after he signed, he was still Shanahan and him were battling over shorts and what color shorts and that kind of thing. And it just makes me wonder if they really like this guy and if they really want him. And I think you're right. I think they're going to move off of Aiyuk for draft picks as part of their financial reset. And I think Lynch told us as much. Now, I think it has to be at least a decent, like the Pats have 2/3 and 3/7.
Yeah.
I think it would have to be multiple draft choices. Like one of those, maybe the Niners threw a pick. Maybe it would be like Aiyuk and a 4th round pick for a couple thirds and a 7th or something like that. I think it could be something where they kind of hide or camouflage Aiyuk's value or lack of value by throwing maybe a player picks, you know what I'm saying, on both sides, just to try to make it a little bit more like we don't have a real definitive angle on the thing. I'm going to share the screen on this one. This is Coach Yak, and he's put this out today. He says, latest mock, and this is from the 33rd team. The latest mock is the Niners taking Missouri wide receiver Luther Burden in round 1. He said some recent mocks have had Luther Burden falling to the end of round 1, but we aren't buying it. He's an explosive playmaker who ran 4.41 at 206 pounds. He's electric with the ball in his hands. He'd be a perfect Deebo Samuel replacement in San Francisco, but he is already a more natural receiver and would be a good long-term fit with Brock Purdy. Now, I brought this up a week ago. I was just going through in the deep dive on the receivers, and this guy, Luther Burden, reminds me of a faster version of Deebo. He's not quite as thick, but he's faster, and he's a tough kid from East St. Louis. Kuiper says he's not going in the first round. Other people think he is. What do you think? Could you see the Niners pivot away, trade Aiyuk? They've already traded Deebo, and maybe go receiver higher up in this draft than any of us anticipate with a guy like Burden the third. What do you think?
Yeah, one thing too, in the private chat here on StreamYard, I just sent you a link of what Mike Vrabel said when he was asked last week at the Combine about being aggressive and getting playmakers around Drake May. So you can play that after this if you want, if not, all good. But yeah, look, after the trade of Deebo, like I do think wide receiver becomes a little bit of a need. Does it become a need to the point where the Niners are going to take a wide receiver in round 1? I think they would think and entertain taking a wide receiver in round 1 if they traded away Brandon Aiyuk, who is due a roster bonus soon. And before Deebo was due a roster bonus, the Niners traded him away. And I had said, best case scenario, you trade Deebo away for a 4th round pick. They ended up getting a 5th. That's about the value that I thought Deebo was going to net back after coming off a bad year. With Brandon Aiyuk, I think best case scenario, you get a 3rd. Maybe more realistically, it's a 4th, and the Patriots take on that contract. If you trade Aiyuk away, taking a wide receiver at number 11 becomes a realistic possibility. Taking a player like Tyler Warren becomes a possibility. Trading back a little bit and maybe taking an offensive lineman in the middle of round 1 and then using some other draft capital to sneak back into the end of round 1 and taking a wide receiver, I think is a realistic route that the Niners could go. It really depends on how the draft board falls. And usually the quarterbacks being taken are the dominoes that have to take place, especially in this instance, before the Niners at number 11. I think Cam Ward is the first quarterback taken. I think Shadur Sanders is going to be taken because it's a light quarterback class. If a team takes Jackson Dart inside the top 10, you're talking about some really good players who could fall to San Francisco. I don't think Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter will fall to San Francisco. So right there, that's 5 picks. And the Niners are sitting there at number 11. If Armand Membu is there, I'm taking him. If you don't like a player there, do you move back to 15 and then can you get within that range of 25 to 32 to take another position of need? Luther Burden could be there. And I really like Luther Burden. He's not a Deebo Samuel type of player, he's more of a better route runner. He has more natural hands. I think that he's going to find success in beating press man, where Debo really struggled in that regard. I don't necessarily think that the Niners need to replace Debo in finding a Debo Samuel type of replacement. But if you do take a wide receiver in round one, you reset that clock if you trade Aiyuk away. You get much cheaper while taking on some of that dead money for this year. And then you have that wide receiver under contract for the next 4 or 5 years. You have Ricky Pearsall under contract for the next 4. And that's a smart type of team building philosophy and team building strategy where you don't quite rebuild, but you reset a little bit. And I could definitely see the Niners doing that. But either way, they need to find a way to rebuild the trenches offensively with that line and defensively with that line, some way, shape, or form in free agency and in the draft.
Here's Vrabel, the new head coach of the Patriots, talking about trying to support Drake May. This was from the Combine. Here's a little bit of Mike Vrabel.
Well, I don't think anybody has a longer appetite. I mean, we all want to win. Like, that's why we're here. That's why I got hired. And it's to win. It's put a product on the field that they can be excited about, that they can care about, and they can support. Like, that's the whole goal. And they shouldn't have to wait very long. And, but we also have to understand that, we're not going to fix every issue on the first day of free agency, or we're not going to fill every hole on the first or second day of the draft. Well, I mean, I'm sure, like, I like to shop like everybody else. And so when you go and there's only one of, a certain car, maybe you have to pay a little bit more for that one car because there's only one of them. When you start to get into a range where you feel like there's an area where players are comparable and you like 3 or 4 players at a certain area for a certain role, you may not have to overspend. But it's free agency. I think that everybody overspends sometimes in free agency.
Is that an indicator that that they, that the Patriots may understand that they need to kind of broaden their scope for the wide receiver they seek? Because they've been trying to get a top wide receiver there for a few years, and it has not happened.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder. I mean, I guess when I first heard, the Niners may trade Brandon Aiyuk, I'm thinking, well, who's trading for Brandon Aiyuk? But is it possible that the Patriots have been and been involved in such a struggle to get a top-tier wide receiver, and now they've got their quarterback, that they might be willing to gamble on the injury and gamble and to try to get a player like Aiyuk at a reduced cost? What do you think?
Yeah, no, I think when you hear Mike Vrabel talk, like, the Patriots aren't in a position where they're going to rebuild, nor do they want to rebuild. Again, it's all about maximizing the window of Drake May being on that rookie contract. You think about some of the teams that have made it to the Super Bowl in recent memory with quarterbacks on their rookie deals. Jared Goff and the Rams, Joe Burrow and the Bengals, Jalen Hurts and the Eagles, Brock Purdy and the 49ers, Patrick Mahomes back in the day with the Chiefs. If you're able to do that when that quarterback is on that rookie deal, you can be aggressive with your team building strategy in paying, and sometimes, as Vrabel said, overpaying at other positions of need. And the Patriots desperately need a wide receiver. And so if they get outbid or if they don't land DK Metcalf, T. Higgins got franchise tagged. The next best trade target at wide receiver realistically might be Brandon Aiyuk, of course, if the medicals check out. We're talking about a player in 2023 who was a second-team All-Pro, had a career year. When he's healthy and when he's right, he's a vertical threat. He's a deep ball guy, but he also is a clean route runner with really good footwork, really reliable hands. And even though he started off his career in the doghouse and then repaired that, and then last year, the Niners hated the way that he handled contract negotiations, for the most part, respected by the coaching staff, respected by his peers. And I think that's a player who New England looks at and says, yeah, it's a little bit of a risk, but we need to get Drake May a playmaker, and Aiyuk could be that player.
It just seems so unlikely that they would move him, but at the same time, I thought your question to him about Aiyuk I thought he was gonna sit there and say, Ayuk's our guy and he ain't going anywhere, and put the whole thing to bed, and he didn't, and now we're at where we're at, and I get the sense that we may see an Aiyuk trade here, maybe in the not that distant future. Let me throw you a couple names that have been bandied about in the last few days, and you tell me yes or no. Today, Jonathan Allen was cut loose by the Commanders. There was talk that the Debo trade could have involved Jonathan Allen. So I think we've got every reason to believe that the Niners have some interest in Jonathan Allen. What do you think? Is that should they try to get Jonathan Allen? Should they make a play for Jonathan Allen as an interior player as they try to rebuild this defensive line?
Yeah, and a lot of the chatter, as you noted, was that the 49ers were interested in Jonathan Allen as being a part of that Deebo Samuel trade, but they kind of balked at it because they weren't willing to take on that astronomical salary that Allen would come to the Niners with. And so the smart play, I thought, see if he gets released, he becomes a free agent, then you can sign him for cheap. And he doesn't necessarily fit what the Niners are looking for and what John Lynch mentioned multiple times in Indy last week, the last time that he spoke publicly of the Niners trying to get younger. But he does fulfill a need that the Niners have at that defensive tackle spot because they need to rebuild that defensive line. They need edge rushers. They need defensive tackles. And Allen is a player who could come to the Niners at a pretty affordable rate, good pedigree, two-time Pro Bowler, good size at 6'3", 300 pounds. He was a first-round pick by Washington back in the 2017 NFL draft out of Alabama, and he's been a very durable player too. Outside of this past year, when he got hurt, it was a pec or triceps, but he still was able to come back for the NFC Championship game, I believe, or at least that playoff run. But his games played. Rookie year 5, but then he went 16, 15, 16, 17, 16, 16 before playing 8. And he's been a pretty good sack guy from that interior defensive line outside of year 1, 8, 6, 2, 9, 7.5, 5.5. And even though he played in 8 games in 2024, he still had 3 sacks. And so it really all comes down to the price tag for a player like Jonathan Allen and a player like Joey Bosa. Because if you can get those players at a decent price tag, I'm interested. If they want more money, let them go somewhere else because I think there could be more cost-controlled options out there. But clearly the Niners have interest in him because they thought about including him in the Debo trade.
I was going to mention Bosa. He got cut loose. I agree with you, by the way. I kind of said the same thing. It's like, do I want Joey Bosa to play with the Niners? I mean, he's good against the run. I think he'd be motivated here. But I really don't want to spend a lot of money on this. What kind of dollar figure do you think they could get Bosa at? What I was saying, 2 years, 2 years at 18 million total, like 9 million a year, 10 million a year, 8 to 10 in that range. I'm okay with, but this talk of like 15 million and north of that, screw that. If he wants that, move on.
Yeah. The highest price that I'm willing to go, $10 million per year. And at 29 years old, he's been injury prone. I'm not sure he's in his prime any longer, but if you can get Joey Bosa $10 million or less, and he's able to stay healthy and maybe injury misfortune can escape him for once. And let's say that he can come through with 10 sacks this year at $10 million. That is worth it. You're paying $1 million per sack, and it's at a preeminent position. That's very important. You need to be able to rush after the quarterback. Nick Bosa hasn't been able to get help over the last few years. Leonard Floyd was just okay. Yetur Gross-Matos was hurt. The D Ford trade did not work out. The Chase Young trade did not work out. The Niners have missed Arden Key and Charles Omenihu, but they left for bigger paydays. Understandable as to why they decided to leave. But you need another good edge rusher opposite of Nick Bosa. And bringing back Joey Bosa, it would be a fun story. Mama Bosa wants it to happen. Nick Bosa has said it's going to be scary for the rest of the NFL. He's talked publicly about it. Joey Bosa has as well. But Nick and Joey, if you want this to happen, if you want the brothers to team up, Joey's going to have to sign for a cheap rate. And he's already made a bunch of coin. Nick Bosa's making $34 million per year. If you're going to chase a bag, you're not going to be able to come to the Niners. That's what I'm telling Joey. If you want to play for a cheap rate, come to the Niners, and I'm flexing my muscle a little bit. I'm utilizing all the leverage that I can. You two can team up, but it has to be on our terms at a price tag that we agree with. And you would hope and pray that Bosa is able to stay healthy. And if you even give him $8 to $10 million and he gets hurt and he plays 12 to 13 games, but when he's on the field, he ends up producing, you know that you're going to be okay because you didn't give him all that much money. They can't operate in just an insane way and give him a bunch of money. It makes no sense with what they've said they want to do. Get younger and get healthier. And so that's kind of where I draw the line with Bosa. Now, last time he had a double-digit sack season was in 2021. That was the last time he played 16-plus games. When he's been on the field, he has been productive. So that could be a good sign where if he can stay healthy, then you know that he's most likely going to be able to produce.
What about Harold Landry? Does that name intrigue you? The Titans are releasing the former Boston College pass rusher. He's a little younger, and it seems like he's been a little bit more productive than some of the other guys who have been cut loose. But he's a little lighter, too. I mean, the Niners typically like bigger defensive ends. He's a little bit more of an outside linebacker size. What do you think of Harold Landry in this mix? Does he excite you at all?
Yeah, definitely more of an outside linebacker type, whereas Joey Bosa is more like Nick Bosa, hand in the dirt, trying to get after the quarterback. Landry, 6'2", 252. He's only 28 years old. He'll turn 29 in June. I actually really like the production, and I think that the fit here could actually work pretty well despite him being more of that outside linebacker, and I don't think that he's going to really break the bank in free agency. And so if you sign a player like Joey Bosa, you sign a player like Harold Landry, you find a way to build up the offensive line, the defensive line, you take a defensive tackle, you take an edge rusher, it helps you right now. It also helps you in the future if you're able to operate within your financial constraints. And Landry is a player who, outside of tearing his ACL and not playing in 2022, he's also been durable throughout his career. 15 games as a rookie, 16 year 2, 16 year 3, 17 year 4, misses 2022. Then he's come back off of that. He's played 17 games each of the last 2 years, and his sack numbers pretty damn good. 4.5, 9, 5.5, 12. Missed that year. Last 2 years, 10.5 and 9. And so if you can get a Bosa, Joey, if you can get a Landry around $10 million and they give you that type of production, then I'm all in on entertaining those types of moves.
There's a bunch of interesting names. Trey Hendrickson is another one. Hendrickson's interesting. I could see the 49ers having interest in him. What do you think the draft pick compensation is gonna be for Hendrickson, or do you just wait for a guy like that to be cut? Will they cut him loose? He to me, Trey Hendrickson is, Myles Garrett would be amazing, but he's going to cost you a ton. Joey Bosa would be good, but he's an older player and he may be hurt. To me, it seems like Hendrickson is, the price tag is going to be lower than it would be on a Garrett. Obviously, Crosby's now re-signed. He's not going to have that level price tag, but I think he's going to give you more production than Joey Bosa. Where are you with Trey Hendrickson? Where do you think ultimately, what are they going to get for Hendrickson?
Yeah, so the early reports are that the Bengals are seeking like a 3rd-round pick for Trey Hendrickson. I would give up a 2nd in a heartbeat. And between him and Myles Garrett, Garrett is going to cost a ton. He's 29. He's had 14 sacks the last 2 years, 2023 Defensive Player of the Year, one of the finer players of this generation. Trey Hendrickson is 30, but he actually leads the NFL in sacks the last 2 years with 35, 17.5 in 2024 and 2023. So he's actually had more sacks than Garrett, but it's definitely clear that Garrett is the better player, but he's going to cost you more. And so if Trey Hendrickson is only going to demand a 3rd-round pick, I'll give the Bengals a 2nd. Here's the thing, though. Entering the final year of his deal, $16 million non-guaranteed. You'd probably have to guarantee that and give him a contract extension. And how do you think that he's going to age? He hasn't missed a game the last 2 years. That's good. But Hendrickson and Bosa, opposite of one another along that defensive line, while not being as expensive as Garrett, that's something that I think the Niners should entertain, and I've said as much on my show.
Greenlaw, Hufanga, Aaron Banks, is it just a fait accompli that they're all gone?
Wow. Tom Pelissero reporting that Aaron Banks could get the Robert Hunt type of deal, 5 years for $100 million, 18-20. I woke up, I think that was on Tuesday morning. I read that article and I'm like, that's crazy. Banks is a good player. That's great money. No chance in hell I would sign him to a deal like that. If he can get that type of money, he's going to leave. As for Talanoa Hufanga, I know he's missed a lot of time, but he's a 25-year-old who was an all-pro a couple of years ago. I think a team with an incentive-laden deal might give him some decent coin, and he'll leave. Dre Greenlaw, linebacker market has taken off. Zach Bond got $17 million per year. Other linebackers are getting paid. And I think a team will be willing to pay Greenlaw as well. Like Hufanga, though, it's going to be performance-based, incentive-laden just because of the injury concerns. I know the Niners really want to bring him back, but Greenlaw hasn't made a ton of money up to this point in his career, and I think that he should try to chase a bag, and I think that he will ultimately.
You mentioned that, the Eagles are kind of an interesting team. Obviously, the Super Bowl champs, you cover them. Is Milton Williams and Josh Sweat, are those guys going to leave in free agency? And how is it that what has Roseman been able to do that the Niners have been unable to do? Because he re-signed Zach Bond. Bond never gets to free agency. I think there was some question whether or not that was going to get done. That deal got done. It sounds like the Eagles would like to bring back Mekhi Becton. Yet he could have a burgeoning market. When you look at them, are they going to wind up losing Josh Sweat? Are they going to wind up losing Milton Williams? What you watch them and study them. What's Howie and the Eagles doing that the Niners need to be doing?
Well, number one, Howie Roseman operates in a different way than the Niners have operated. He signs his players to contract extensions early. And by doing that, he probably gets them at about 60 to 70% of the market value as compared to when you wait, right? And so the Niners have waited, whereas Howie has gotten these deals done early. He's paying Devontae Smith $25 million per year. The Niners could have had Brandon Aiyuk at that price. They waited, the wide receiver market got reset, and then they had to overpay Aiyuk at $30 million per season. And so that's the example of how Howie has done business with what the Niners have not done. And it's cost the Niners a lot with players in these contract negotiations over the last few years. And I think that's part of the reason why Jed York is saying, hold on, we can't allow this to happen. And we can't let this continue. And that's why I need to step in and we need to change the way that we do things. And so that's the difference between the Eagles and the Niners with how they approach business in this manner with these contract extensions. As for Josh Sweat and Milton Williams, I think they're leaving. I think Milton Williams is going to get $18 to $22 million per year. He was the second highest graded pass rushing defensive tackle in the sport last year. He's only 25. He's played 50% or less of the snaps up to this point in his career, limited tread on the tires, and teams are always looking for interior pass rush help, and he's still young, and he's really dynamic. I think Josh Sweat is going to leave because I think he's going to get paid $18 to $20+ million per year because teams are looking for a pass rusher at defensive end. He's still in his late 20s, and he's been highly productive and consistent throughout his career. But here's also the thing that the Eagles have done that the Niners have not. They've been able to replenish the cupboard as far as talent goes. They've been able to replace players who they lose with some of their homegrown players. Fletcher Cox retires. Hello, Jalen Carter. They lose other players and they're able to replace them. The Eagles are in a situation right now. Milton Williams leaves, Moro Ojomo comes in. Josh Sweat leaves. Jalix Hunt was drafted in the 3rd round last year. He was awesome in the playoffs. They lose Hassan Reddick. They whiff on Bryce Huff. Nolan Smith has a breakout year. And so they've been able to replace players who leave, whereas the Niners haven't been able to do that. They still haven't been able to replace DeForest Buckner from when they lost him after 2019.
No, it's true. They really haven't. And the Eagles getting it done up front, it also gives them, there's a little bit more preparation. I mean, did Aiyuk get hurt this year because he held out? Well, I don't know. It's hard to say, but it didn't help. I guarantee you it didn't help.
He wasn't in football shape.
He wasn't in football shape, and if you're not in football shape, you can't necessarily protect yourself.
One article in football shape. He was hurt all year.
Exactly.
Yeah.
One article another guy that actually I wanted to ask you about that I really think he was cut this week by Jacksonville What do you think if, and as I said, once you had asked John Lynch about Aiyuk and he gave you that answer, I'd heard enough. That to me tells me all I need to know, that the shopping Aiyuk, they're going to move Aiyuk. So mentally, I'm kind of moved on from Aiyuk, and I'm thinking about what the Niners are going to have to do, and that's why I brought up Luther Burden. But another angle is maybe get a better receiving tight end. It's a great receiving tight end, but also Evan Ingram just got cut by Jacksonville. He's a 2-time Pro Bowler. The Niners have really had a second tight end of note. What do you think of playing more 12 personnel, signing a guy like Evan Ingram, and, whether you trade Aiyuk or not, just you're not going to have Aiyuk at least for the first 2 months of the year, most likely. What do you think of adding a tight end like Ingram and trying to go 12 personnel and try to compensate for missing Aiyuk that way?
Yeah, I've been saying over the last couple of years, I'd love to see more 12 personnel from Kyle Shanahan. It just hasn't been in the cards because I guess that's not his offensive philosophy. Evan Ingram's an interesting player. He was a first-round pick. I thought it was a little bit of a reach by the Giants, and he had some good years where he put up good numbers, but suffered from some drop issues. And then the last couple of years, it's been a pretty solid player for the Jacksonville Jaguars. He hits the market at 30 years old. He's very athletic, not really the blocking tight end at all that George Kittle is. But I thought that the Deebo Samuel trade signaled that George Kittle is going to be more a part of the passing game. And if you bring in a guy like Ingram, who's more of that pass catcher, it does allow you to be more physical. You can run more 12 personnel. You can be that bully ball type of team, especially if you're a little bit thinner at wide receiver. And I agree with that type of strategy. What I would do if I'm the Niners is that, look, George Kittle's entering the final year of his deal. I know that he said that his camp and the Niners were talking and they're trying to work out a contract extension. That hasn't happened yet. And even if it does happen, I'd love for the Niners to finally draft a young tight end. The only young tight end that they have drafted in recent memory, Cam Latu and Braden Willis. They both stink, but this is a really good young tight end draft class that is coming up, where day 2, day 3, you can get a Mason Taylor. You can get a Harold Fannin at a Bowling Green State, a player who had more than 100 catches at the tight end spot. That's almost unheard of at that position in college football. That's the route that I would go. Re-sign George Kittle, give him a contract extension. In the meantime, it opens up some cap space, but then draft a young developmental tight end. But maybe they won't do that because maybe they like Mason Pline, who I know you're kind of high on as well.
Yeah, I like Pine, but I definitely think they could, this is too good of a tight end draft to not get one. You might even want to get two. I mean, there's some good players. Let's finish with this. You put out a tweet today just talking about what we were talking about off the start. Now, Jed York would prefer that Kyle Shanahan focus more on coaching, less on being part of contract negotiations with players. And you got a quote here. York would prefer Shanahan focus on doing what he does best, scheming it up and coaching the players on the roster than worrying about making sure so many of his high-profile players make bank. Silver added that Shanahan's seat is not hot. It's not even lukewarm. So ultimately, it sounds like Jed feels like Shanahan's the right guy, but that maybe Shanahan should focus on what he does, and maybe John, it sounds like Parag is going to be a bigger part of the negotiations. I guess overall, let's finish with this. Do you view, if this is the biggest story of the day, that Jed has kind of hit a new structure here where, hey, Kyle, yeah, you're the big dog making the money, but you know what? Just coach. And John, you're the GM and everything, but just draft, and let's let Parag, deal with the negotiations. Is this going to be a positive move for the 49ers, or do you think this is rife with all kinds of possible internal issues and Parag's going to be a hard negotiator and you may see persuasion or not there on time? What do you think? Is telling Kyle and John and Parag and kind of redrawing their lanes and saying, you guys each stay in your own lane? You think that's going to be a positive for the team?
Yeah, I think it can be. And as far as Kyle Shanahan's seat not being hot, not even lukewarm, according to Mike Silver, I do think that Jed York is like, man, I fired Jim Harbaugh and Jim Tomsula and Chip Kelly were disasters. It set our organization back to the point where we had to scrap that. Those coaches didn't last long, had to hire Kyle Shanahan, John Lynch. We had to tear it down and rebuild. And now we've been one of the more successful organizations in the NFL. We've made it to 2 Super Bowls. We've come so close to bringing home that 6th Lombardi trophy. We're not far off. But in business, in sports, you always have to adapt and evolve. And if you don't, you will get lapped. You will get passed by. And I think that's what Jed York is looking at here in that manner, right? He knows that Kyle Shanahan and thinks that Kyle Shanahan is the right man for the job. And Kyle Shanahan's a top 10 coach in the NFL. And everybody wants to knock Lynch and Shanahan for their team building, missing in free agency, missing in the draft. Yet at the same time, we've been talking about the Niners in recent memory as one of the most talented teams in the NFL. Well, both things can't be true, right? They've built one of the most talented teams in the NFL. Have they had misses in the draft? Yes. Have they had misses in free agency? For sure. But they've had a lot of hits to the point where this Niners team in 2023 was one of the most talented teams that I have ever seen in my entire life of watching football. Did they finish the job? No. Is that the ultimate goal? For sure. And they shot themselves in the foot. They should have beat Kansas City in that Super Bowl. They didn't. But I think the core pillars are in place. But I think the benefits that we talk about, Larry, is everybody having a defined role. Jed York's going to own the team. Parag's going to handle contract negotiations. Kyle Shanahan is not. He's going to focus on coaching and offense. John Lynch is going to run the front office and player personnel department, and everybody in turn has a defined role. And moving forward, we're going to work collectively because that's what we need to do. But people are going to work together within the constraints of what their strengths are. And so those are the benefits and the advantages that I think that the Niners can have in having a little bit of this organizational reset moving forward.
One last draft thought before we bolt for the door. Invader 49er says Mason Graham is the safest pick at the top of the draft. What do you think? Is there somebody that you view as the safest pick for the 49ers at 11? Would Graham even potentially fall to 11? I saw that they weighed him at 294 and he played at 318, which is always a little concern.
25 pounds lighter than what
that's a concern, man. That's a concern. And he doesn't have the quick twitch. You can kind of see that. Is there a prospect that you view as like, man, that's the guy at 11?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Invader 49er. Like, I think Mason Graham is one of the safest players in this draft. And I know that he's not huge. I know that he's not twitchy. I know that he's not overly physical, but the tape also doesn't lie, right? He has been a really steady producer at that defensive tackle spot. Is that in part due to Kenneth Grant playing alongside him? Yeah, maybe. But Graham has been one of my favorite players in this draft class. And I've kind of gone back and forth, but like my 3 favorite players in this draft, Abdul Carter, number 1, Travis Hunter and Mason Graham have kind of been in that number 2 spot. And so is this what the Niners have needed for Graham to fall to number 11? He's 25 pounds lighter. His percentile as far as the other weigh-in and testing numbers, not great. If he's there at number 11, I think you take him. He's a good run stuffer. He's a good pass rushing defensive tackle. He played at a really good program that values physicality, that has developed really good NFL players at Michigan under Harbaugh. He was a focal point of a team defensively that was a terrific defensive unit that won the NFC Championship game under Jesse Minters, one of the top young defensive minds in the game. And so I would love that pick at number 11 if he fell. Him and Membu, I'd love those selections.
The highlight that I caught today that I thought was pretty good, we'll finish with this one. Our friend Baldy, you probably talked to Baldy a bunch since you do Eagle stuff, but yeah, Baldy had an incredible little breakdown here. And tell me what you think of this, and then we'll bolt on this one. This is Baldy talking about Cam Skattebo. Now, Cam Skattebo went to my college. He's a Sac State guy. He's a Bay Area kid. 1,700 yards, 21 touchdowns. Baldy says against great competition, electrifying. Here's his quick 30 on Skattebo. Here's Baldy.
Skattebo, Arizona State, Cam Skattebo. Watch this run. This is ridiculous. What a night in Tempe. Breaks a tackle, drops the shoulder. Watch this contact balance here. Like, he stays on his feet and then goes. See ya. Finishes the run. Touchdown. How about this one right here? He's starting to go sideways here. Presses the hole, bounce it. Look at this cut. Sideways. And then he squares up. Boom. Wow, he can find the opening. He sees the daylight now. How about this run down here in the goal line? Like, he gets bubbled here, right? He's 8 yards away from the goal line. But then he's going to square up. Now, where's the victim? Watch him drop this right foot, left shoulder. Look the way he does these guys. Like a victim. Like, they don't want no part of Skattebo. Like, pick out a game. How about this 10-man front right here? 10-man front. There they are. He's getting sandwiched in the backfield, except he doesn't. He comes out of the soup. Man, like, what a year for running backs. You get them in any round. Unreal balance and burst right here. Like, here you go. It's just one great run after another. Like, look at this. He's taking these shots and just bouncing right off of it. There you go. Like Skattebo. Like, you can't get enough. It's fun to watch. Oh, he also covers kicks. Captain of the Nut Squad as well.
Captain of the Nut Squad. That's awesome.
What do you think? Cam Skattebo, he's calling him Skattebo from ASU. Should the Niners draft him and replace Juice with him? It'll be a very popular move. He was a great college player. What do you see, Chase? Do you see a great college player that's just a guy in the NFL, or do you think he's special?
I also think, obviously you went to Sac State. Jackson Slater, another name from Sac State to look out for. Maybe a late round offensive lineman. Goes to Sac State. I think he's a Niner fan. I think he grew up a Niner fan, which is obviously interesting. The biggest thing that stood out to me when I watched him this year, and Baldy pointed it out too, was the lower half balance and the contact balance. He has such a strong lower half. And I'm not just saying this because he's white and Mike Allstott was white, but Mike Allstott was so big and had such great contact balance. He would get hit, but you couldn't upend him. And Cam Skattebo is like a lighter Mike Allstott who's a little bit more versatile and has a little bit more speed. He's, of course, a running back. Allstott was a true fullback. He was massive with that big neck roll back in the day for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but he reminds me a little bit of Mike Allstott. And you can use him as a running back. You can use him as a fullback. He's so good running the ball, good eyes, good patience, good speed, explosion, physicality. He's also a really good pass catcher. This is a player who, if he fell to the Niners, I think that Kyle Shanahan could have a lot of fun with him, just finding ways to utilize him in a variety of ways. And I've talked about this on the show. What I would do, it doesn't make sense to pay a fullback $4 or $5 million. I know Kyle Juszczyk has been a fan favorite. I'd get rid of Kyle Juszczyk. I'd shed some of that salary. I would draft Cam Skattebo if you could. Use him in that type of H-back, running back, fullback, pass-catching manner, and you can give him a lot of carries, and I think that he can be successful at the next level. Also, keep in mind the situation that the Niners have at the running back spot. Christian McCaffrey's 28. He's coming off bilateral Achilles tendonitis and a PCL injury. Isaac Rendo's been injured a lot. Jordan Mason's a restricted free agent. He could be a trade piece for the Niners, or another team could try to sign him, and the Niners aren't going to match that offer. Then you're looking at San Francisco. They have running back questions. And Skattebo is a player who I've really become a big fan of all throughout this year. I saw what he did against Texas, a Texas team that has countless NFL dudes on the defensive side of the ball. I think his game translates, to answer your question.
Yeah, no, I think so as well. That does it for us. Thanks to Mancini's, thanks to Pig and a Pickle, thanks to Sharp Corner, Sports Cards and Collectibles. One super on the way out the door. Charles Limp. Kenneth Grant equals the Cowboy. Justin Smith. I'd be very, very satisfied if the Niners traded back a spot or two and took Kenneth Grant from Michigan. I think he's a tremendous player. Chase, tell people about Chat Sports. What are you doing the rest of the day? What are you doing this weekend? Are you laying low, or are you guys always coming up with something new?
Man, going into free agency on Monday, the content does not stop. And I imagine that a lot of news is going to break over the next few days. It's going to impact the Niners. Check out the 49ers report on YouTube, approaching 160,000 subscribers, videos every day. Put out a show earlier today looking at the top 10 free agents at every single position. So that's up on the channel. Last night did a deep dive looking at the Deebo Samuel article on the Players Tribune, where he really revealed a lot of interesting details about his relationship with Kyle Shanahan and how the trade went down, the aftermath of that. So the content will not stop. You know how it goes, Larry.
Oh, man, keep it rolling. Chat Sports. Chase does an amazing job. For Chase, I'm Larry. Have a great Friday, everybody. Peace.
Yeah, never met a man I've been scared of. Careful.